13 civil society groups, including Accountability Lab Nigeria, Yaga Africa, and the Public and Private Development Center, have called on the government to engage with protesters and address their demands. The group of organizations have criticized the president's August 4th address, stating that his speech failed to address the core demands of Nigerians. The civil society groups noted that the president highlighted medium to long-term policies to improve the economy, but also ignored immediate demands such as reducing hunger, cost of living, insecurity, corruption, and implementing their NSAS recommendations.
Now, while they welcome dialogue, they encourage the federal government to begin its dialogue by releasing all arrested protesters and initiate sanctions against the security agents who attacked the protesters. Joining us is the Chief Executive Officer of Public and Private Development, PPDC Center, Jubril Shitu. Good morning, Mr. Shitu.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Good to have you. Let's, first of all, start with, your views on the idea of dialogue between the Nigerian government and the protesters and those, of course, who have championed the protest. Are you all for that dialogue at this stage?
Yes, but I think I would first start with reading the room, which is to acknowledge the fact that a few people have died as a result of these protests. I don't think that either any family or anyone's father or mother or even sibling would love to have someone peacefully protest and, end up dying as a result of that protest. So my condolences to those families, and also kudos to the Nigerian Army for acknowledging, because we've seen, at least during the NSAS protest, there was a denial of the role of certain actors. So we acknowledge that. But very importantly, the nation, as we have it, cannot afford any situation where we have either a truncation of our democratic destiny or a devolving of this situation into anarchy. And it's very clear. One thing that the president came out with, which is very well acknowledged by everyone, is that there should be a dialogue. But one thing that was not so clear was, where is the dialogue starting from? Who has been appointed to oversee the dialogue? And that's something that it will be very useful, especially for those that are looking to engage with the government and to ensure that some of these demands, as you are aware, there are so many demands out there. But what we've tried to do is to encourage a harmonization of those demands, which is why when you look at the statement, it acknowledges the president's areas of focus, particularly where he talked about education and looking at agriculture. But there are some other areas which Nigerians in general really yearn for, and for which they are demanding answers. They are demanding answers to insecurity. They are demanding answers to hunger, which is an immediate need. So it's not the long-term focus, but just the immediate need of hunger. How are we addressing it? Of course, we've heard about the 20 trucks per state that was shared across all 36 states of the Federation, but more details, and I think that would really assuage the concerns of Nigerians. And I say that these concerns are well placed. So let's have the president, give further directives as to who should be leading these dialogues. And let's also have a way forward for Nigerians, which focuses not just on the long term, but on the short and immediate terms.
All right. And how do you suggest that the president communicates this new policies that you're suggesting be implemented immediately? Would you maybe have him make an address? Are you maybe open to the idea that we should have a conversation, a one-on-one conversation where the president is addressing Nigerians off script, maybe not the typical scripts, because there have been people who've criticized that, saying that it's a bit rigid. Maybe having a press briefing of some sort where he can answer questions on the go. Is that something that you think would be a great tool, or are there other suggestions you might have?
I think the president has addressed the nation, and one thing that Nigerians have complained about is that there seems to be a disconnect between the reality of the average Nigerian versus the commitments of governments as a whole. And let's recognize that there are 3 tiers of government. But of course, the federal government plays a significant role, especially when it comes to certain policies like the security of the nation. The federal government has that sole responsibility. The police is centralized, the armed forces are centralized. So when we say we're addressing hunger, for instance, insecurity is a major component of that hunger that Nigerians are facing. And when you look at the situation, especially in the northern part of Nigeria, from the northeast even to the northwest, you have a huge number of out-of-school children, you have a large number of IDPs, and you have, bandits all over the place causing mayhem and trying to divide the country. So what we need is that the president, as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, and the president, in his capacity, can give the directives. But let's hear the directives. He can issue the directive to the Secretary General of the Federation, to the ministers. He has 47 ministers, so he can issue the directive to any one of them. But let's have the dialogue moving, and let's have those active recommendations reaching the president from the dialogue. And that's what we are asking for. The president has come out to address the nation twice. And I think that that's good communication. Twice within 1 week, although belated, but better late than never. But what we are saying is, irrespective of how this particular group is constituted, the president has issued a directive. Let's begin to see action. And that's what Nigerians are talking about. When we talk about the cost of governance.
It depends on what you call a directive. I think there's some disparity between what the protesters have demanded and what the president said in his speech. He's addressed Nigerians once, not twice, by the way. The second video that you saw, was Bayo Nanigo responded yesterday and said that that's an old video. So they, within their team, they're not even sure who posted the video, why the video was posted, and what it hoped to achieve amongst themselves. But the point is, the president has addressed Nigerians once, and the response that we've seen is that a lot of Nigerians do not agree with any of the things that he said. He still sounds like he's campaigning. He doesn't sound like he is detailing proper response to the demands of the protesters. There is that, one hand. Another thing is, we have a situation where Nigerians are at a very, very interesting stage with regards protesting. It started with the End SARS protest, the whole idea of we don't have any leaders. These are our demands as a people, and these are the things that we want the government to sort out. Pretty much the same thing happening now. Do you think that there is even anybody to represent the protesters? If people come out tomorrow and say, oh, we are speaking on behalf of the protesters, and Nigerians generally say, we don't know you, we don't recognize you, we didn't ask you to agree on anything, whatever it is that you're agreeing with, Mr. President, is none of our business. Until Mr. President makes these moves, none of your dialogue or negotiations are relevant to us. What happens then?
Well, I'm not to speak for many Nigerians, but one thing that is very clear is I think that we are honest and we are reasonable people. If we see governance happening, if we see some genuine efforts on the part of government to address the concerns, I'm sure that the reaction from the population will be very clear to support whatever efforts, how genuine they may seem, on the part of government. But what we've seen, and I think that that's where the anger is coming from, what we've seen is that rather than address the issues of the cost of governance, we see more ministries being created, we see more development commissions being created, we see purchases for the executive that one really questions whether we are trying to navigate our way into a country that is better for the average Nigerian, or if we're having a country that is serving just a few pockets. So I think Nigerians are genuine enough to be able to decide for themselves. But let me address the issue of leadership in the protest. When we talk about having leaders in the protest, I wonder and I ask, what really do we mean by that? Because when you look at the statements that came out from the Inspector General of Police, he said those that were interested in coordinating protest movements should register and should inform the police, and they did that. And by the way, all that is needed is that if I'm a Nigerian, if I'm concerned about the country, I have every right to peacefully protest. So in the first instance, I don't necessarily need to go join a group to say I want to protest. I could protest in my own way. But fine, if there are groups that to coordinate themselves, and we have such groups, we have various movements. There is a Adeyanju Deji, that is one of the protest leaders. We have a Take It Back movement, and there are several other groups that have come out to say, well, we are the ones that are coordinating these protests. So again, when we talk about legitimacy, I don't think Nigeria belongs to any particular individual. Nigeria belongs to all of us. And if there are individuals that voice out the collective concerns, yearnings, and aspirations of the larger population, no matter how poorly framed they may be, I think it's very important that we engage. We understand what the issues are, and the government, provides appropriate response. Nigerians decide for themselves whether or not the response is sufficient. And I think that the fact that we have Nigerians on the streets, or either staying back at home and not really going to work, speaks volumes about how the protest concerns have been addressed. Again, if you are looking at prominent individuals in the society to say, okay, maybe this might be a benchmark for determining who, is on the side of those that are protesting or not. You've heard from prominent Nigerians. You've heard from Femi Falana. You've heard from Professor Wole Soyinka. And they've spoken out and they've clearly outlined what they would like to see as the government's response. So again, I think that we should move away from this, idea of having leaders in the protest. We have concerns. The question should be, are these genuine concerns? If yes, have governments sufficiently addressed these concerns, looking at it from the short term to the medium term to the long term? And let's move away from some of these narratives that are not really helpful for us. Of course, one of such other narratives is the narrative of, oh, some people are trying to promote military takeover. Let's be very clear. Nigeria as a country, we've come very far in our democratic journey, and I don't think the average Nigerian wants that to change. And we've seen the reactions to some of those flags, even from, the protesters on the ground. So let's move away. It's just like going to the market. You get to the market and you're saying you want to turn back because somebody is selling okrika in the market. You don't turn back because somebody is selling okrika. You go to the market and you look at what you are trying to buy.
Oh, well.
You buy what you want to buy from the market and you move.
All right, Mr.
So
Shutu.
let's focus on the issues and let's abandon some of these unhelpful narratives.
Some would argue that the whole narrative about people trying to overthrow the president and whatnot, are really just the Nigerian government's choice of words and choice of interpretation of the protest in order to maybe clamp down on it. But I also want to ask about the whole news about the Nigerian government putting people on a watch list. The foreign sponsors of the protests and whatnot, including, I believe, Omoyele Sowore, on the watch list. How does that help with the idea of dialogue and the idea of meeting in the middle between the government and the people?
I think that we really need to have government focus on the issues. So, yes, of course, there's the dynamic where Omoyele Sowore, has been an active an actively engaged citizen, but there's also the other part that any average Nigerian in diaspora who has family that is supporting back home, maybe I'm a worker in UK, I'm someone in the US, I'm sending remittances, and let's look at diaspora remittances. Diaspora remittances exceed 20 billion per annum. So would you then say that someone in diaspora cannot comment on the national issues, or that he has to travel all the way back home because it's until you are back home that you can speak on the issues? I think that that's counterproductive to what we are trying to achieve. But if there are security concerns, and we've heard the DSS talk about some of these intelligence reports that they received before the start of the protest, one would have expected that the security agencies, and the DSS in particular, should have gone and engaged those people that are trying to cause chaos and trying to ensure that there is violence, while those that are peaceful and organizing themselves peacefully are engaging with the government on the real issues that the average Nigerian is facing. Let's not forget, insecurity is an issue. Hunger is an issue. It's a real issue. Corruption is an issue. The government's waste is an issue. So, again, if there are security concerns, the security agencies should do their job. And I'm really happy to see, I've seen some of the videos where, you see a policeman trying to shoot, and another security agency is saying, no, don't shoot at unarmed protesters. But beyond that, on both sides, if there are citizens that are trying to cause violence, that are trying to, upturn our democratic journey, they should be brought to justice. Likewise, if there are security agencies or if there are security agents that have violated the law, that have shot at protesters, they should also be held accountable.
All right.
We can't fix ourselves in hard narratives and not look at the big picture here. The big picture is, are we trying to address the issues? Are there real issues to be addressed?
I mean, the next couple of days or maybe weeks, maybe even months would tell, how far and how well the idea of a dialogue will go. But of course, there are things that are definitely certain, which is that the president, at this point, must take necessary steps to put calm across the country. If he has to dialogue, let him dialogue. And of course, their approach towards the people that they term protest sponsors will also determine how well that goes. Thank you very much for your time this morning. We'd love to speak with you again pretty soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.